Great lawyers don't always know how to build great law firms. Let's change that. Join Ben Gideon as he shares hard-won lessons from building his own financially successful law firm and practical insights from top law firm entrepreneurs, business consultants, and more. This is a podcast for lawyers, by lawyers. Welcome to Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm. Produced and powered by Law Pods.
Today's episode of the Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm podcast is brought to you by Supio. I just spent an hour doing a webinar with the Supio folks. It was great. We had the head of business development and also one of the lawyers from Texas who's been an early adopter of Supio and walked through some case models of how you use Supio to put a case together. It was very, very impressive. I would encourage everyone who doesn't yet have an AI platform for their law firm, if they're a plaintiff's side, personal injury, medical malpractice type of law firm, check out Supio and get the demo. Our podcast today is also brought to you by Vision Spark. Vision Spark is the company that helps law firms and other businesses find seconds in command. You know any seconds in command, Jeff?
That would be me. It's exactly where I want to be.
When I think of number two, I always think of Jeff.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate that.
We have Vision Spark to credit for the search process that led us to Jeff, and then Jeff has led us to the holy grail of, it appears, to doubling our revenues in less than a year of your time at our firm. So it's all paid off very well. Anybody who needs a second in command like Jeff, I would encourage you to talk to Vision Spark. Our podcast is also brought to you by 1% for Planet. 1% for Planet, folks, is the organization that allows you to contribute 1% of your gross revenues to environmentally conscious nonprofits. Our firm has done that. It's a great organization that's allowed us to partner with some really terrific nonprofits in Maine and throughout northern New England, and we really would love to have other firms join us in that. And if you do join us in 1%, please reach out to us and we'll give you a plug on the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm podcast. This is Jeff Wright, Chief Operating Officer at Gideon Asen, and as always, our host, owner, partner, Ben Gideon. Hey, Ben, how are you today?
Hey, Jeff. It seems like you've already had a long morning.
It was a long night. I was here for about 14 hours yesterday, and then I was in at like 6:45 this morning because we have a very busy day. So, and technology has not been my friend this morning, so I'm having a good time.
But what kept you here for 14 hours yesterday?
Well, last night I wanted to work on our focus group, which is coming tomorrow.
Gustavo will be making his second appearance. Gustavo, for the listeners and for Berkeley and Zach, is Jeff's lawyer alter ego. When he plays a lawyer in focus groups, he appears under the name Gustavo.
Correct.
And last time he did a focus group, he managed to win on behalf of the defense against two seasoned trial attorneys. So now he's going up against the one. When's that? Is that tomorrow night?
It's tomorrow night. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be tuned in to see how Gustavo performs this time.
I'm thinking I'm going to go 2-0. So
I don't know.
Pretty excited.
I like our chances on this one, but we'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you want to introduce the guests?
Yeah, we're very, very excited today to be joined by Zach and Berkeley from the Roux Institute. The Roux Institute is something that is, very well known in our area up here in Maine, and their affiliation with Northeastern University in Massachusetts. But a lot of our listeners aren't from the area, so I think it would be good for Zach and Berkeley to talk a little bit about the Roux Institute and obviously what your roles are there. So
yeah,
welcome.
Sure. Thanks so much, Jeff. Ben, we're excited to be here. So let me start by saying a little bit about the Roux Institute, and then Berkeley and I can introduce ourselves. The Roux is coming into its sixth year, and we're, like you said, part of Northeastern. A gift from David Roux made it happen, who's a Maine, billionaire, and wanted to help drive the Maine economy And so the Roux Institute serves as an opportunity engine for graduate education, applied research, entrepreneurship, and there's a number of startups that are launched out of here directly, and then custom learning, which is the work that Berkeley and I do, which non-degree courses for businesses focused on AI analytics and project management. So the Roux Institute is one of Northeastern. Now it's at like, I think 14 or 15 campuses. Berkeley, do you remember how many we're at across Canada and the US? Like there's tons of them.
Something in that ballpark.
Yeah. I didn't know that about Northeastern when I joined it. There were so many campuses, but Northeastern has developed this very entrepreneurial model where, campuses pop up in areas of need and kind of business relations. So there's like a Northern Virginia one that has lots of military and government connections, in Silicon Valley, Vancouver.
I happen to know there's one in London because my daughter's boyfriend is a freshman at Northeastern, and he's spending the year at the Northeastern campus in London. And my daughter actually just got back from visiting. It was a great trip. So it's really like changed as a university in the last bunch of years, and it's continued to grow in this way. So to step back, introduce myself, I come to this work from K-12 education. I was a teacher, a principal, then a teacher of teachers for a number of years. I moved into virtual teaching pre-COVID. So I learned a lot about how to drive engagement and learning in the virtual space that wasn't just kind of passive and having people just sit and listen. Trying to think about ways this was for teachers, but how to engage them in the learning so that, yes, they were virtual, but they were actually like walking away from virtual sessions with real learning and real outcomes in mind. And I joined the Roux about 2.5, 3 years ago when this custom learning program that Berkeley and I now lead up was kind of nascent and looking for direction. And so I came on without any real AI learning or experience. And my boss, I told, when she was hiring me, I said, like, I don't know anything about AI. Like, I just know about learning and teaching. And she said, that's okay. I have someone for you to meet, and you two are going to work together to run this. And so that's by means of having Berkeley introduce herself and her side of the thing, I kind of bring the pedagogy and learning, and I'll let Berkeley share more about herself.
Yeah, sure. So I originally started as a mechanical engineer. I was doing my PhD in mechanical engineering, and I had some really hard sensor calibrations to do. So I started getting interested in data science and how you could use statistical modeling for these sensor calibrations. And then I ended up moving out to San Francisco and becoming a data scientist. I worked at Square, the payments company, building underwriting models, and then moved back to Maine when I had my second kid to be close to grandparents, and was recruited to teach in the graduate school at the Roux Institute, which I really enjoy teaching, but I also like to be working with industry. And so when I started teaching some industry classes, that was when I got really excited about staying at the Roux long term, because I never saw myself being a long-term academic. And I was really excited when Zach got brought on, because like he said, I have some graduate teaching experience, but Zach's depth of teaching knowledge has been great. And I think we're a really good team because we have complementary skills.
Let's just start with the very basics here. So for lawyers and those who own and run law firms, start with the primer. What are the core things you think they should be looking at, and what do they need to know now with the development of particularly new AI platforms and technologies?
Yeah, so I think the most important things to know are, everybody should familiarize themselves with AI and understand sort of the risks and benefits of these different tools, sort of what they're best at. I think there are a lot of legal specific AI tools. There are also some general purpose tools that work well for attorneys, but sort of understanding what the best use cases for AI are. AI is great for summarization. It's great for research, with the caveat that it does hallucinate, which means that it makes things up sometimes if it doesn't know the answer. We like to say that you have to think of it as basically a really smart intern, and think about the fact that with an intern, they can bring you really good work. But if you just give that work to your client, if it's not good, they're not the ones who are going to get blamed. You're going to get blamed. And to top that off, that really smart intern is a little bit of a pathological liar. So they'll tell you that they know things when they don't. So, you got to keep that in mind and remember that you are always sort of the final check for it, but it can do a lot of really great work. And I think thinking about how these models work can also be helpful when you're using them.
You guys have engaged with some lawyers and law firms and helped to teach certain kind of principles. And can you just tell us what in that role, kind of how you've approached it, what you've done, and what have you, what takeaways do you have from those experiences?
I think a big one, as we've started to think about law firms and lawyers in particular, is that the learning about AI is different than a lot of the ways that lawyers have learned traditionally. So because and this is true, across not just in law firms, but because it's this new skill that's out there, everybody's having to learn it on the job for the most part. So it's definitely not taught in law school in the same way. And so there's all these people in the middle of their careers having to learn how to integrate this. So that's a challenge, right, for everybody across every business right now. In firms in particular, the kind of apprentice model of learning and how that functions, where people sort of have a mentor and learn under them, and the lack of sort of formal structure makes that even more complicated, because now, like, how is this learning going to be delivered? And it, like Berkeley said, because of the risks involved, because of the hallucinations, because of like being strategic with it is so crucial. There's a challenge really with like 15 lawyers approaching it 15 different ways within a firm, and then teaching the people under them 15 other ways, and really lacking coherence and strategy. And so we try to bring a kind of a more coherent framework to that. And I think rather than just focus on the tools themselves, we believe that to understand the tool and use it well, you need to understand a little bit of the concepts behind it. Not a full PhD, but like we don't just, at least in the learning that we do, it's not just about the product and the tool, right? It's about like what's going on behind the scenes with this particular tool, because that helps you understand the risk of hallucination, how to prompt it better, like, which out of a few options can use it. So those are all pieces we try to bring into our learning to help make it more, I guess, more outcomes focused and actually bring some value to folks.
So I know AI's been around for a little while now, and I wonder if you could tell me, because we struggle because it seems like every third party or every vendor or every software that we have to engage with is rolling out some semblance of an AI platform, and to various levels of success. Some of them are terrible. Other ones are doing one part of what we needed to do, but not all the parts. So I'm curious, are we just on the cusp of beginning of seeing the true value of AI, or are we at a midway point? I feel like we're just at the beginning of this, but I'd be interested in what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, the million-dollar question, and nobody knows for sure. I think we're at a point though where there's a massive hype cycle. There's a lot of potential use cases that are great. There's also potential use cases that aren't great, and I think not everyone has really learned how it works best for their job and their field. So I think we're sort of in the middle. I think some of the promises aren't going to pan out, but I think you also have, we've talked with a lot of firms that say that they've bought all these tools, no one's using them, no one knows how to use them. So I think as you get those people trained up, they're going to realize a ton of productivity that they haven't realized yet. And I think in a few years, we'll be at a point where we really understand what it's good for, what it's not good for, et cetera.
It's also interesting, this is something Berkeley and I have talked a lot about recently. There's a lot of claims made in all these tools and softwares, right? I think right now it's agents, right? This is agentic, agents work with this. And, that's like a newer thing, right? Within the last like year and a half or so, that agents have become big. But even within that, there's a lot of gray, right? And things that claim to be agents, but they actually aren't operating independently. Yeah. Well, I'll let Berkeley give us the breakdown for this group.
Yeah, so I mean, the word agent is thrown around pretty loosely. I think, I don't know that there's really an agreement on a true definition, but I think what I would say the definition of a true agent is, it's a large language model that has the ability to make autonomous decisions. So you can give it different tools. Most of the typical, chatbots can behave in this way now. So say you're on, ChatGPT and you ask it a question. If you ask it a complicated enough question and put it on research mode or something, then it will actually make a research plan as to how it's going to figure out. And it's going to step by step say, okay, first I'm going to look at this, then I'm going to look at this, then I'm going to look at this, and then it can access different tools, whether that's the internet or APIs or whatever. So I think the true definition of an agent is that sort of autonomous decision making. Now, for every use case, you don't necessarily want or need that autonomous decision making. And if you have something where you have like a workflow that you want to automate, say you get an email from someone, you want to summarize that email and, this isn't a great use case, but, summarize that email and tell you about it in Teams and tell you how urgent it is. That you don't necessarily need an agent for because it's the same steps every time. But that could be like a workflow, or some people might call that an agent. I think a lot of the tools are calling that an agent. So I think, finding the solution that works the best. If it's something where there's really well-defined steps, you don't necessarily want to give it that autonomy to make its own decisions. But there are use cases where you do need to give it that autonomy.
So stepping back, to Jeff's point, there's such a proliferation of different platforms and products right now. It's kind of mind-numbing and hard to navigate. If you were approached by, small, mid-sized law firm, they don't currently have any AI platforms that they're using sort of on an enterprise level. Maybe some of the lawyers individually do things at home in their personal life, but as a business, they haven't adopted any, approaches yet. What would you recommend that they start with? What are the kind of core platforms that you're thinking would add most value, and how would you recommend starting to roll out that process?
So I think it depends, what kind of attorneys they are and what they spend most of their time doing, whether that's, research or drafting things or, litigating. There are definitely legal tools like CoCounsel, and I think LexisNexis makes a version that are research-based and look at legal cases. There are also more general purpose legal tools like Harvey. And then also you can just look at, the AI tools that are general purpose for the public, like ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot. And, we always tell businesses when they're thinking about using AI to think about what you spend your time doing. What are your business goals? And what are the things that you either want to make faster or better, and then base your decisions on that.
And I think that's really crucial because there is this like hype and pressure for people to sign up and buy it. And these tools are expensive, right? So like what is the goal of bringing on AI? And it's like, yes, it's to be competitive with other firms, but that can't be the only reason. Like, and this is all intention depending on how firms bill, right? Because those that have billable hour constraints versus ones that are, operating in a different model, like I assume like you guys are, have different tensions there, right? With like, what does it mean to save time? And is that something that is being passed on to clients or not, right? That kind of a major impact as well.
I mean, it seems to me that every business probably, and certainly every law firm, will need to have some large language model platform, whether that's Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, or whatever, Perplexity. I currently subscribe to all of them. And so, again, putting it back to you, it's not practical or economical to subscribe to all of them. So which one should someone subscribe to if they don't know better and they need to have access to an enterprise level large language model platform? Because again, I think every business will need that, right? I mean, there's not really an argument against that at this phase, even in this early phase of AI progression, right? It's an absolutely essential tool that every business will need.
Ben, I'd say yes. And this sort of brings us to what we do, right? Yes, like with training, with proper training and like guidance around it. Personally, I really like Claude. I think it does a number of things well in the workplace. I haven't even started to play with its co-work function, which we're trying to still get access to at Northeastern in our enterprise subscription. But I've heard from other folks who use the co-work function that it's great, but like even without that,
co-work is the concept that it can automatically access all of your other platform documents
and browser
for your
tabs. Yeah,
right. So
yeah.
we're on Microsoft SharePoint, or you have Dropbox. It can integrate with that, so you
Yep.
don't have to upload documents
Right.
as you use them. It will have access to that
Yeah.
automatically.
Claude doesn't. Berkeley and I use the Claude projects a ton. They're really useful. You know, I could see them in law being useful for like case. Like
And what is a Claude project?
A Claude project is like its own mini RAG system that allows you to upload sources of knowledge and give specific constraints and instructions around it, so that your chats within that project or questions you ask are all referencing just a specific kind of zoomed in set of files and knowledge, so that you can really target the discussion and it kind of persists over time rather than like one-off chats, which just allow for
Is that kind of Claude's version of Notebook LM? Yeah, I mean, I have to say, having spent a lot of time with ChatGPT and Claude, I am now growing to prefer Claude to ChatGPT. I find it's less conversational, but it's more businesslike and less seemingly susceptible to influence in terms of wanting to please. But
yeah, and I think talking about, your preference for not having it just agree with everything you say, there are some things you can do within each of these tools to customize them to how you want. So they call them different things, but they each have, instructions that you can add in your user preferences where you give it, overarching things that you want it to do. So you can tell it like your job. And, I tell mine, like, don't be overly agreeable. Only agree with me if I'm correct. Tell me if you're not sure about an answer. Always give me references. Don't use a bunch of business jargon. Just be concise. And I actually have mine set up. I say don't answer in more than 100 words unless I explicitly ask you to. That's one of my AI tips, is if I'm brainstorming or looking for ideas, I often want it to give me very short ideas, and then I ask it to elaborate on the ones that I like. So I'm not, waiting for a long time and wasting a bunch of my time and energy. And when I say energy, I mean the compute energy that, drives the cost up and causes environmental impacts. Having it respond in like 5 pages when I just want to say, like, give me 5 activity ideas for this class. Like 4 of them are probably going to be bad. So I just say, give me 5, and then I move on. Sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent.
No,
but
that's actually
I actually think. Yeah. Sorry, Ben.
No, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, I actually think that's important because a lot of listeners here have probably taken that first step of using, a large, open model or chat or Claude, but I think they're using it like a Google search, and it sounds basic, but if they're not setting their parameters like you talked about correctly, or prompting it in a way to get the most out of it, it's really not going to work for them the way it's designed to. And I think that's where, you guys kind of come in. To anyone can sign up for chat, but in order to get its best use case, it has to be done appropriately. And my guess is the majority of people are not using it correctly. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I think that can be true. And, we have several courses on this at different levels. And our, most sort of beginner course, we started several years ago. And to be honest, we thought it was going to sort of age out very quickly, because everyone was going to figure this out. But people have other stuff to do. And not everybody is interested in this, so not everybody has really taken the time to learn about it. And we found that it continues to be a really popular class. Sometimes you see these articles saying like prompt engineering is dead, the models are too smart now, but no matter how smart the model is, it can't read your mind. So it can't know, who you're doing something for, what your role is, like what your preferences are and the style that you want your answer in, etc. So you still have to give it that information. And if you're new to prompting, one thing you can do is ask it, like, say, this is what I want to do, write a good prompt for me, or what questions. What do you need to know more about to answer this question better? And it will actually ask you questions and give you examples.
There's a great book that I read called The AI Driven Leader. I don't know if you've seen or read that, but it has a lot of useful guidance in terms of how to best use a large language model, whether it's not platform specific, but they advocate something called the CRIT model. Have you heard of that? Where you define the context, you
Okay.
define the role, you then have
Yeah.
the AI inquire so that it's actually asking you a series of questions to better refine what you're looking for. And then you clearly define the task. And I found using that, it just it frames it in a way that it's a much more robust and disciplined set of prompts that achieve a much better outcome generally.
We have a similar kind of like resource that has all of those same topics. Going back to this idea of projects, one of the things you can put in the instructions of a given project is, whenever I start a chat, ask me 5 questions to clarify where I'm going, right? And then that way, that's embedded in the project. And every time you start a conversation in that given project, it's gonna, whatever you prompt, right? It's gonna ask you questions about it. So you cut down on having to do that in every individual prompt, and instead drive efficiency and make sure that you don't forget to do that. And it's always pushing you and kind of building those pieces in. So you could even upload into the project files, like a structure that you want, right? Your prompts to go and force it to push you if you don't properly prompt it, right? And to like equip the project with that knowledge and understanding in particular.
And you can even define exactly which questions you want it to ask you. So, we use it a lot for like, we'll have a template for something, like a 1-page summary for a course that we do. And we'll say, before you make this, ask the user, like, what are the learning objectives? Who's the audience? Whatever. So then you give it all the information that it needs to give you a first draft of that thing.
Yeah, it's really quite remarkable what you can ask it to do. I mean, Jeff and I did an hour-long live podcast covering 10 fairly complex business topics. And just to prepare for that and make sure we could get things in the time frame, I role-played it with I think it was ChatGPT, and it said, we're going to do this hour-long. It knew what the topics were. I said, you play Jeff, and we're going to do the podcast, and I played around with that for 5 or 10 minutes, but I can't say it replaced Jeff and his role.
You can say it. It's fine.
But you can do. I'm cross-examining this witness. You play the role of the witness. Be aggressive. Be defensive and difficult. And you can. There's lots of roles, but I think a lot of times people don't think about, well, you're asking it a question or putting in a prompt, but what is its role? Because if its role is the judge or the jury, that's very different from if it's opposing counsel, or if it's just a neutral arbiter who's trying to, or a consultant who's giving you advice, or a friendly person that's aligned with your interest. So it's going to be very different depending on what role you give it, just as any person would be if you were interacting with them.
Well, you mentioned at the beginning Jeff's role as Gustavo, right? In these focus groups. Well, I just was reading about a new AI firm called Simile that does these digital twins and creates kind of archetype AI avatars across different. It's for focus groups, right? That all these companies are already using to test against different regional and ethnic backgrounds and all kinds of different pieces, age, gender.
What's it called? I know this is interesting.
Simile.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh boy, we're gonna sign up for something else now.
And yeah, it's pretty cool. I assume it's gonna change a lot of the way focus groups work because of that, right? Because it purports to be able to allow tons of questions and permutations of those questions across different groups to learn and explore, what a given person would say. And this simulation stuff around, deposition prep, that stuff too is all coming online with, more realistic simulations so people can practice both, what it will sound like in advance, get feedback, right? There's a bunch of different tools out there. One called Alta Claro has something called DepoSim, and I think it's like a new launch product of theirs, but that does this like live deposition experience that, I mean, I haven't tested it, but I think more and more of that stuff will come online and be higher and higher quality across fields, right? In law, and also in same for like teachers and doctors, anybody who has that sort of performative aspect of their job and needs to like do something in front of a customer or a client.
Yeah, I mean, and building on that role play thing, I mean, a friend who's an attorney I was talking to was saying that he'll set up a role play to poke holes in his arguments, and he'll like chat with it while he's driving to court so he can practice his arguments. And I think even beyond like an official role play, asking it to poke holes in any of your arguments or asking it whether something you've written is correct is a great way to use it. And I think, especially attorneys maybe who like to think about different sides of arguments, it's a really cool use case. And when I'm learning new stuff, I use it that way a lot. I'll say, I wrote this, is this correct? And I don't always trust what it tells me, but I'll just say, give me a reference, and it really helps me make what I'm writing better. I think that's one of the best ways to use it.
Yeah, that's so critical, and I completely agree. It's really, that's a great, because it's really, it can be really hard when you're invested in something or your own work to honestly critique it, but AI doesn't have that problem with feelings. It'll give you honest feedback if you ask it to do that.
Yeah,
in a way that may be hard to get from others, and I find that always leads to improvements. In fact, I think the concept of stress testing anything using AI is going to become mandatory. I mean, at our firm, we've already said when we work up a case, you're required to stress test that with AI. You're required to ask the AI to play the role of the defense lawyer or the judge and say, what are all the challenges and problems that you're seeing with this case, and how do I address those? Because why wouldn't you do that, right? If you have that at your disposal, you're going to learn it later when they actually do attack your case. So why not learn it now and preempt that?
Need help on a complex personal injury or medical malpractice case? Gideon Asen accepts case referrals and regularly co-counsels with lawyers nationwide on high-value claims. The firm has recovered millions of dollars in cases that competitors turned away because they dig deeper. Ready to learn more? Email bgideon@gideonasenlaw.com to start the conversation. Gideon Asen shares fees as permitted by the laws of each state. Don't let complex cases overwhelm your practice. Elevate justice together with Gideon Asen.
So moving on from the large language models to the kind of more industry-specific things, this is where I think there's such a proliferation of platforms. I mean, you just mentioned a couple I'd never heard of. We've experimented, as Jess said, with a couple. How do law firms, I mean, I know Harvey's a big one that's had billions of dollars of investment capital. We actually haven't used that one. I'm curious if you can speak to that, but we have tried co-counsel, didn't like it. We're using a different platform now called Paramble that's specific for medical malpractice. We love that. We're familiar with Supio. I've heard really good things about that. But there's so many. So how does one start to navigate that universe?
I think, your points about trying them and liking them or not liking them are good. I think starting with what your actual use case is and finding the one that matches the type of work that you do, and then testing a bunch of them and come up with a use case and say, like, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish here? Is it making me faster? Is it making me better? Is it poking holes in my arguments? What's the goal? And then test a bunch of different platforms and see which one helps you achieve your goals the best.
Do you think we're ever going to get to, one of the things we're struggling with is we have to use multiple platforms to get what we want. So in an ideal world, as this evolves, we would like to have, I guess, one-stop shopping, for lack of a better term. Right now we're using, the open models, we're using Chatter, Claude, but then we have medical malpractice, and we also have an AI that's within our CRM system, and then we're using a separate AI for intakes. Do you think we'll ever get to a point where there's a one-stop shopping that's going to be able to do everything within one simple model?
Probably not as well as all of the individual things do it. So I think that every product is going to incorporate AI and try to get you to pay extra for it. At some point, we might get to a point where that's just part of the product for each individual product you use. But I think what makes some of these really specialized tools good is that they spend a lot of time fine-tuning the model and getting it to work really well for that specific use case. So I maybe for law they would come up with one that's good for all the different legal things, but it does seem like probably smaller firms that fine tune for different specific use cases will win, unless they get bought by a bigger one and they incorporate all of that. But I think you'll still have like something legal specific probably, and then you'll probably want like a Chat GPT or a Claude.
In terms of,
is my guess.
Ben, in terms of your question, well, one other one that I've heard folks using, it's hard to get the trial for these. So for us, we really, I can only like look on the websites and like try to explore the trainings that they have. But Legora is another that I've heard good things about it, and seems like it has just.
What does that do?
I think it's similar to Harvey or any of these that allows some like basic prompting. It can do like tabular review of pulling in all the documents on a case and sort of allowing analysis on it. It can do track changes in Word, and help like to draft. So they're like, and which I think a number of them kind of purport to do the same things. I think in terms of how to select, of course, I think Berkeley's right, thinking about the specific use case, what's highest priority. But I also think this is where, in law in particular, there's a challenge, because firms are run by and large by lawyers, right? Attorneys, and different from other businesses, they haven't necessarily incorporated and privileged technical people to help with this kind of decision making. And so who is that person at a firm who has the both like authority and vision and alignment with leadership, but also the kind of technical skill set to, and it, now it's AI, right? But it could have been something else in previous decades, right? To help make some of these decisions. And so this is where I think it's where the role of paralegals, I think could very well change, to go from people who are, highly skilled in supporting lawyers around case law and work into like some, this new brand of paralegal potentially becomes more of like a technical expert along with those pieces, and is able to like understand the use cases and make recommendations or make decisions or demo or pilot pieces, right? To like help move the firm forward. And where it's actually something, it's kind of cool that we do it at part of Northeastern, is this co-op experience, right? Where grads and undergrads can go and do a co-op, but it's like the perfect role for someone who's like a data science or AI graduate student. You can embed them for a little bit, like tell them your challenges, have them look, we're trying to work with a local firm to do this. Like put a grad student in there and have them just observe what the lawyers are doing and make some recommendations, right, about what they should do. Because it's not realistic to think that someone's going to go to law school, be a strong, experienced lawyer, lead a firm, and be an expert on, workflows and AI. Like that's a lot to put on anybody from a decision-making standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that come out of what you just said, Zach. I mean, so one of the things that I think about a lot is when Berkeley, you use the term use case a lot, I've noticed. And when I think of use cases in a law firm, they're really two different, very distinct areas of that. One is in the practice of law itself and the legal services. That tends to be a harder way to use it because there is judgment, individual attorney discretion. There's certainly client confidentiality concerns. You worry about hallucinations, obviously, and problems that AI can create for you. But then there's the whole host of other things that you're required to do in a law firm that fall really more under administrative, answering the phones, triaging new cases, logging them into the system. There's a whole host, and that's probably stuff that's common to every business, where the use case is really just administrative efficiency, where it feels like right now, if AI can do it better than humans, that is a win. and it removes a lot of the tasks for people that are boring, that lead to high turnover, high burnout. So I'd be very interested in developing that within the model better. And I think most businesses haven't really begun to do that much yet, but that's the easy part. And then the harder part is, well, how would AI be used to deliver legal services, drafting contracts, drafting briefs with litigation, triage, evaluating cases, figuring out, arguments, stuff like that. That's hard. That's a harder quote unquote use case. So, and then to your point, Zach, about the internal structures, I've thought a lot about, in the old world, you'd have like a chief technology officer or an IT person in your office. Don't really need that so much anymore because everything's cloud-based, and our IT firm is located somewhere else and they can manage all that. They don't need to come here and, tweak our servers, or we don't have stuff like that. But it does seem like we would benefit enormously from an in-house sort of chief AI manager who could look at all of the systems and figure out best cases and different platforms, and then work on training. Are you seeing businesses, whether it's law firms or not, move to that kind of a model? And if so, how are businesses structuring that?
Berkeley, do you want to take that, or?
Sure. Yeah. I think at like big companies, you're definitely seeing a chief AI officer. I think everyone is just trying to figure this out right now, though, because you have in a bigger company that has like a bigger technical team, you have your technical people, your data scientists, your engineers, and they might be working on the more complicated AI stuff. But then you also have the whole rest of the company. And a lot of these people have turned on these AI tools and they're like, oh, great, I have Copilot, I can build agents now. But what they're not thinking about is that, like, just because it's low code doesn't necessarily mean it's low complexity. So like if you have an agent that's running a workflow, how much compute is it using, and how much is the company getting charged for that computing power? What's the security? Have you just given information access to a bunch of people? Is it how much is it hallucinating? If you're making like a chat bot for somebody, how reliable is it, and how reliable does it need to be, right? Like, risk with hallucinations really depends on the use case. And with attorneys, we've talked to some of them where with in-house counsel, they say, sometimes we're less risky. We just want to less worried about risk. We just want to innovate. We want to push fast. Whereas if you're, counsel for an external company, obviously, then not making mistakes can be paramount.
Yeah, and part of the problem as a law firm owner is that if everybody's just doing it freelance their own way, you have, 8 lawyers in your firm all doing something different, and you don't know what they're doing. What we really want is to systematize it in a way such that there's a minimum standard that everyone's following, and there are some outside parameters that people aren't going beyond. But developing that requires understanding the capacities and limits of the different systems, and then developing that protocol and then training people on it, all of which most people don't have time to do. And they haven't even gotten to step one of that, of understanding all of the capabilities, right? We're just sort of playing around with it now. And without identifying a single person with authority within an organization to be able to do that, it seems like hard to get that done.
It is. And I think it also comes down, and this is true, in maybe law firms even more so than other places, but I think, we've seen across the board, finding time to invest in learning, whether it's about AI or like effective project management or matter management in firms, right? And the time spent to train people on that, it is time, right? If you actually want people to learn something new or introduce a framework, it's not just like a 15-minute stand-up meeting or like in our minds, like an asynchronous video that you say, like, watch this on your own. Like, you've got to actually invest the time and like bring people together, explain the rationale, teach them the ideas, have them practice it, discuss it, give them feedback. Like, those things all have to happen for learning to take place. But that takes time to do. So there is always a tension there, right? Like, is it worth investing in? I think, Berkeley and I would say it is. Like, spend, for your line of business people, spending 2 hours on one of like a training like we have on how to prompt effectively and understand the risks of AI will result in far better work outcomes, right? Beyond the 2 hours you spent investing in this training. But like on the surface, it could feel like, oh, we're putting 40 people through 2 hours of training. Like that's a ton of time that we're losing. And so I think it depends on the vision of the org and where they want to put that bet. But when people use these tools incorrectly, I'm sure you've all seen it, but like, we've seen these emails or chats that are just somebody obviously just is like pulling something from AI, putting it right in. And it's like, we're just making everybody dumber, right? By doing this. It's like, I don't want to read someone else's AI response to my question. We could just ask AI ourselves if I was trying to do that. And it makes them look bad too when everyone else knows it was AI and not them, right? It's like, well, what role are you serving at this company? Like if you're just asking
I
AI,
just have my agent read those and get back to them.
Right.
I don't
Exactly.
personally look at it. So take us through, if you guys, before we wrap up, if somebody was to hire you guys to come do trainings, what's the protocol? You guys said you have an intro training, and then do you have more advanced trainings? What do those involve?
We have trainings kind of across three groups. We have technical ones that go deep, teaching people Python, extended machine learning concepts for attorneys in most firms. Those probably aren't that relevant. But the other two that we offer are leadership ones, helping kind of understand what's going on in AI, because we believe that having, again, like understanding the concepts is crucial to making decisions. And then those trainings are focused on strategic enterprise-wide decisions, right? Like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? How are you going to know if this investment was successful? And then thinking about like, what are the next steps? How do you implement? Who are the people you need on board? Sort of all just technology change management thinking with respect to AI. So that's a kind of one piece of training that we have. And the other is more like applied line of business stuff, where it's like the basics of prompting. Berkeley and I just launched a more advanced prompting class where we talk about personalization, how to use notebooks or projects, and to do those more advanced pieces, as well as like a matter management class. Because again, that's something we've heard from attorneys is often passed down in this kind of apprentice style. But for a firm to be like, here's how we approach matter management in a strategic way, and that this is how we want all of our staff to do it, so that it's aligned, so that people are more interchangeable, and that we can actually have a system that withstands personnel change. So the other thing we do in our stuff that I think is different from asynchronous learning is we customize everything. So we meet with people before we teach anything and talk about what their use cases are and talk about their tools and make sure that what we're talking about in the learning directly relates to what their people are doing, rather than kind of a generic training that theoretically covers the stuff, but and which is, I think, makes a big difference again when it comes to takeaways for folks.
Yeah, and we do try to prioritize like the things that each role needs to know, sort of back to the idea of the more expert AI person or people within the company. I mean, everybody should learn the basics of how to prompt well and how to be safe about it. Maybe how to use a legal specific tool that's relevant for your job. And maybe go up to the level of like a Claude project, ChatGPT notebook level. But not everybody needs to know how to like get into Copilot Studio and build a complicated agent. And you have to be concerned about all the things that I mentioned before. So then you can identify a few people in your firm who are going to be, or one person who's going to be like the person who does that. And we have more in-depth training for that. But we understand that, attorneys are busy. You already have a skill set. You're not going to spend all of your time on AI. So like, what is it that's absolutely essential for you to know?
And how are the classes delivered? Are you doing these online? Do you come to the firms?
Most of our classes are online synchronous. We really believe in these synchronous courses because our courses have a lot of interaction, and we come up with practice scenarios that are relevant to your work, which helps people sort of connect the learning with what they do so that they use it going forward. We can do things in person, but usually people don't want that because their teams are usually spread out.
And how do folks get in touch with you if they're interested in getting some training?
They can email us or check out our website. Can we put that stuff into the show notes? Do you guys have show notes?
Send it over. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. I think find us at the Roux custom learning website. But yeah, we would love to talk more. Follow us on LinkedIn. Berkeley's speaking at a sailing conference today in Newport. So if you're in
Wow.
If this gets up soon, you can go. She's a very in-demand speaker for her ability to make AI translatable. I think to
sailing,
to sailors.
I'm curious. Yeah.
So sailing is not my expertise. What happened is I got invited to talk about AI at this Maine outdoor conference, and somebody from the sailing organization saw me speak and said, like, you have to come talk at our conference in Newport. So that's where I am today. That's why I'm in a hotel.
Yeah. Well, Newport's lovely. I love Newport. My in-laws live in Newport. So
Oh, nice.
That's where
This is my
got
first
married
trip too.
there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Well, it's so great to have you guys, and we've enjoyed our relationship with the Roux Institute. And thanks for joining us and educating folks on AI. I think this is probably the first of many programs we'll need to have on this as this continues to evolve and change rapidly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was great to come on. Thanks for having us. And let us know how we can help you all, and we'll keep. We're still learning across industries what to do here, and the law industry in particular has been really interesting to us because of kind of some of the stuff we talked about, where we think that there's just a spot for training and support, and because the deluge of just stuff that is being thrown in everyone's face, right, which is just, it is overwhelming and hard to deal with. And so we're kind of like a impartial as much as one can be in that space, right, to like offer some guidance outside of all the hype.
Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Elevate, Build and Grow Your Law Firm. Share with colleagues if you found it valuable. Remember, building a successful law firm takes discipline, strategy, and determination. But you're not alone. Produced and powered by LawPods.